I used to think that the world is mostly good people with good intentions, and if you have good intentions, it's okay. Like, it's okay to offend some people from time to time, it's okay to make mistakes, and I never feared. And now we're living in a different world. We're living in a world in which people try to use cancel culture and take things out of context and so on, and it is more worrisome. So lots of interesting questions come from the issue of how do we move forward in a world where people have bad intentions. I have embarked on a long journey of trying to understand human irrationality. And why did I pick that as my life's mission? And the reality is that it all goes to my personal life story. Many years ago, I was badly burned. 70% of my body was burned. I was in hospital for about 3 years. When I was in hospital, I observed all kinds of things that I thought were not ideal. I didn't call them irrational. I thought they were not ideal. And the thing that bothered me the most in those early days was the question of bandage removal. So imagine, for me, most of my body was covered with scars. Somebody had to take bandages off. And the question is, you have to take the bandages off. How to take them off? To rip them off quickly, one by one, for a very long process, because most of my body is burned, or to take them off slowly. And the nurses believed that the right approach is the fast approach. That, of course, created a shorter time, maybe only 40 minutes to an hour, but the intensity was very, very high. The bandages adhere to the bleeding flesh, and then ripping it off is incredibly painful. I think there are very few things that are as painful as removing bandages from extensive burn patients. So the nurses thought that the right approach is just to rip and rip and rip and rip and try to minimize the duration. The intensity was just terrible. I was afraid of this treatment. I was screaming a lot, very, very tough. And of course, they did what they thought was the right thing to do. And when I left the hospital, that question still was in my mind. What is the right approach to treat burn patients in the right way? Ripping the bandages quickly as they did, or slowly as I thought was better? And I started doing experiments. I would bring people to the lab and I would try different versions of pain on them to see what created more pain and less pain. And I learned that the nurses were wrong. The thing that got to me was the idea that the nurses, good, kind, wonderful people, wanted my best, and they were following their intuition. They were following what they thought was correct, but what they thought was correct was wrong all the time, and they created unnecessary suffering for their patients. Then I expanded my scope of inquiry. And I asked myself, what are other things that we think we're doing the right thing? We think we're serving people the right way, we think we're doing the right thing, but in fact we're not. In fact, what we're doing is actually creating damage. And that has been my life's mission, is to try and understand what are the things that we think we're doing right, but we're actually doing wrong. The COVID pandemic for me was a very, very strange period. It started me feeling at the height of my career. For the first few months, I helped every government, every company, everybody who wanted help with social science. How do we give money to citizens? And what do we do with distant education and distant work and releasing prisoners and domestic violence? Huge, huge amount of questions. And I felt I was very useful. And then I discovered that within all of this being useful, there was a large group of people that also really hated me. They thought I was destroying the world. They thought I was part of the conspiracy. On a particular day, I get an email from a woman that I once helped. And she said, Dan, what happened to you? How did you become that person? And I said, what do you mean? And she sent me a long list of links with all kinds of things. One of them was a video. In that video, it said that I was badly burned, true. 70% of my body, true. Almost 3 years in hospital, true. But then it went on to say how because of that, I started hating healthy people. And that's why I joined the Illuminati and trying to kill as many healthy people as possible. There were other videos with other things, but they were all like that. They were taking something that was true, adding information that is not true, and making me look like an unbelievable villain. I got death threats almost every day. People were shouting at me in the streets, which is also an extra level of being tough. There was one woman who was so overtaken. She was just pointing at me. I was sitting having a beer with a friend, and she was just pointing and saying, "Murder, murder, psychopath, psychopath." And she couldn't stop. It was tough to be so hated. People with so much passion, misinterpreting things I've said, editing videos. There was videos of me with the background of Nazi concentration camp. People called me Goebbels for the chief. In the beginning, I tried to fight it. I tried to meet these people, explain, talk to them, and so on, and I basically failed miserably. One of the things when you think about misbelievers is they try to make the other side not just hated, they try to make the other side unredeemable. They try to have what we call moral outrage. That's why they use pedophilia so often. This is a simple story of good versus evil. And you, me in this case, Dan, is on the evil side, and you'll always stay on the evil side, and there's no gray zone in that. One of the things I learned was that these beliefs are trying to create a story that is very simple of right and wrong, light and dark. And because of that, pushing the other side into the moral unacceptable realm is one of the strategies. So misinformation is really incredibly interesting. And the question is, why is it so popular, so powerful? So two answers to start with. First, as human beings, we are more connected to negative information than to positive information. The second thing, which is really interesting, is that when we are stressed, a bit of information makes us feel in control in the short term. So imagine that you used to feel good, something bad happened, now you're not feeling so good. And you're stressed, you don't understand what's going on, where things are going, and so on. And then all of a sudden you hear a story. Oh, really, this is about a pharma company who is doing something X, Y, and Z. At that moment, you feel better. Why do you feel better? Because you feel you understand the world. Oh, I thought like I couldn't understand what's going on. Now at least I understand it. So in the short term, you feel better. But then you go to sleep. You wake up the next morning and you feel worse because now it was just like yesterday. Plus, you think there's some terrible forces in the world. And you say to yourself, what did I do yesterday that made me feel better? Oh, I went on the internet and I found this video. And you go again. And then it goes down and again it goes down. So it's a little bit like itching a mosquito bite. Nobody will tell you, if you have a mosquito bite, itch it. No. In the short term, it feels good. Short relief. In the long term, it spreads the poison further. The same thing happened with misinformation. Hate is very tough. I am sure that if I was not a social scientist, I would have just left. But I'm very curious, and I have this really need to try and understand. It was very tough, very emotional, but as a social scientist, I don't regret it. I think if I can make something good out of it, if people can understand this problem better, if we can start fighting it as a society, then I'm grateful for this very complex gift.